This is the main news of Korea today. While ordinary people are suffering from interest bombs due to a series of recent interest rate hikes, executives of the four major commercial banks have held a performance-based feast over the past 3 years, including 108.3 billion won in performance-based bonuses. By bank, Woori Bank was tallied at 34.74 billion won, Kookmin Bank at 29.9 billion won, Shinyan Bank at 25.4 billion won, and Hana Bank at 18.3 billion won. A total of 1,047 executives received incentives, followed by Woori Bank with 455, Shinyan Bank with 238, Kookmin Bank with 218, and Hana Bank with 136. Kookmin Bank received the highest performance-based bonuses for each executive. In 2020, Kookmin Bank executives received 1.2 billion won in performance-based bonuses, the highest among the four major commercial banks. In the same year, Woori Bank executives received up to 610 million won, Hana Bank executives received up to 500 million won, and Shinyan Bank executives received up to 311 million won, respectively. Meanwhile, interest rates on new loans handled by the four major commercial banks during the period were on the rise, the survey showed. Among them, Kookmin Bank and Woori Bank saw the largest increase. Kookmin Bank saw its fixed interest rate on household credit loans rise from 3.27% in 2020 to 4.72% in May 2022, and its variable interest rate on credit loans rise from 2.75% in 2020 to 5.33% in May 2022. During the same period, the fixed rate of household mortgage loans also rose from 1.84% in 2020 to 2.52% in May 2022, and the variable rate rose from 2.50% in 2020 to 3.71% in May 2022. Woori Bank's fixed interest rate on household credit loans rose from 2.60% in 2020 to 4.52% in May 2022, and variable interest rates rose from 2.51% in 2020 to 4.51% in May 2022. The fixed rate of household mortgage loans also rose from 2.63% in 2020 to 3.89% in May 2022, and the variable rate rose from 2.26% in 2020 to 3.72% in May 2022. Concerns are growing over moral laxity ahead of the launch of a new start fund worth 30 trillion won. Concerns are rising that there may be cases of recovering credit by being written off after deliberately overdue rather than faithfully repaying. The new startup fund refers to a bad bank worth 30 trillion won that allows financial companies to purchase bonds that are feared to be insolvent or insolvent by small business owners and self-employed people affected by COVID-19 to reduce 60 to 90% of the principal and pay them back in installments for up to 20 years. With the government investing 3.6 trillion won in the budget, Camco plans to create a new start fund. Those subject to the reduction of the principal of the new starting fund announced by the Financial Services Commission are small business owners and self-employed people who have lost their ability to repay and suffer long-term arrears for more than 90 days. The principal reduction is limited only to the excess debt that exceeds the property and income held by the debtor, and the principal reduction is not made if loan repayment is possible through property and income. The Financial Services Commission believes that there is little incentive for normal debtors to become delinquents through deliberate arrears, as they cannot conduct normal financial transactions for 7 years, such as new loans and credit card use due to registration of defaulters. However, there are voices calling for minimizing those subject to principal reduction, as the extensive debt adjustment could increase the loss of local credit guarantees and cause moral harm to some debtors, such as intentional delinquency. An official from the financial sector said, "We are in favor of lowering interest rates and extending the repayment period, but it is serious to write off the principal. I will bring Jud," he said. There will be growing dissatisfaction with the situation where people who tighten their belts and pay back well are at a disadvantage. The banking sector is moribund in order to prevent Jud. They also say that penalties should be imposed on debtor of insolvency. Currently, the National Council of Governors is reportedly preparing a joint statement asking for revision of the government's plan to operate the new startup fund. Recently, young people who feel burdened with living expenses due to rising electricity prices and soaring prices are increasingly looking for self-rescue measures to save money. Various methods are being sought to reduce the burden of living expenses, such as no air conditioner people who do not turn on air conditioners even in hot weather, and no coffee people who stopped visiting cafes. In fact, prices of living expenses are rising all over the place. According to the National Statistical Office's July consumer price trend on the 4th, electricity, gas, and water supply rose 15.7% last month compared to the previous year. This is because electricity prices, 18.2%, and urban gas, 18.3%, all rose due to the increase in public utility rates. This is the largest increase ever since statistics were compiled in 2010. Prices that consumers can feel in their daily lives, such as eating out costs, are also soaring day by day. The Living Price Index, also called shopping basket prices, rose 7.4% as of last month from the previous year. The price of personal services rose 6.0% last month from a year ago, of which the price of dining out rose 8.4%, the survey showed. Under these circumstances, the shoulders of newcomers to society who have just begun to make money are particularly heavy. Some young people refrain from going out because they think they have no choice but to spend money when they go out. There are also many hypo people who give up their vacation this summer. As a result of a survey of 1,024 people in their 20s last month on whether they plan to take a vacation, 25.1% of all respondents said they'd give up their vacation. Among them, the biggest reason for giving up vacation was the cost burden, 44.4%. As inflation is expected to continue for a while, the National Assembly has taken a solution to ease the burden of meals for office workers, including beginners in society. On the 2nd, the National Assembly passed a bill to raise the tax exemption limit for workers' meals from less than 100,000 won per month to less than 200,000 won per month. The revision was made to ease the burden of eating out expenses for office workers, as it was pointed out that the existing tax exemption limit of 100,000 won per month has been fixed since 2004 and does not reflect current inflation. The Ministry of Strategy and Finance is also planning to prepare measures to stabilize the people's livelihood during the Chuseok holiday in August while watching the trend of inflation. Japan has decided to raise the minimum wage by the largest margin ever this year. The Asahi Shimbun reported on the 2nd that the Central Minimum Wage Council of Japan's Ministry of Health and Welfare has decided to raise the minimum wage by 3.3%, 31 yen, to 961 yen, 9,508 won, from 930 yen, about 9,202 won, per hour. Considering the increase in household burdens caused by inflation, it is the second consecutive year of the increase, following last year, 3.1% and 28 yen. Critics point out that it is still lower than other advanced countries such as the UK and France, but concerns are rising at the same time that self-employed people will be severely hit. The Kishida cabinet plans to raise the national average hourly minimum wage to more than 1,000 yen by 2025. The biggest reason why Japan has decided to raise the minimum wage by the largest margin ever is that prices such as daily necessities have recently risen. In Japan, which has seen low prices for decades, the burden of inflation has increased, with inflation hitting the 2% range for 3 consecutive months due to rising raw material prices. Japan's minimum wage is determined by the local government council of each province based on the target presented by the Central Council. Each prefecture will decide on the final increase based on the Central Council's target for the increase and apply it from October this year. Unlike Korea, in Japan, different minimum wages are applied by region. 47 prefectures are divided into 4 grades according to economic conditions, and the amount of increase varies accordingly. If raised as scheduled, Tokyo, which has the highest minimum wage in the country, will be 1,072 yen per hour, about 10,607 won, and Okinawa Prefecture, which has the lowest, will be 850 yen, about 8,410 won. The difference in minimum wage between the highest and lowest regions will reach 222 yen. According to the Asahi Shimbun, the current minimum wage gap between Tokyo and Okinawa has more than doubled compared to 15 years ago. In the first half of this year, the trade volume between Korea and Taiwan was $28 billion, accounting for about 4% of the total trade. It ranks 6th in terms of trade volume among all trading partners. As China announced military drills in waters and airspace around Taiwan as a protest against U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan, there are concerns that the future situation may worsen and disrupt exports to Taiwan. According to the Korea International Trade Association on the 4th, the total trade volume between Korea and Taiwan in the first half of this year was $28.289 billion, up 28.2% from the same period last year, $22.061 billion. Specifically, exports increased 31.5% to $14.49 billion, and imports increased 25.0% to $13.88 billion. As a result, the trade balance, which subtracts imports from exports, recorded a surplus of $529 million. In the first half of the year, Taiwan's trade accounted for 4.0% of Korea's total trade, and the trade volume ranking was 6th among trading partners. China, $158.6 billion, topped the list, followed by the US, $95.57 billion, Vietnam, $45.372 billion, Japan, $44.152 billion, and Australia, $31.097 billion. In terms of exports, it ranks 6th after Hong Kong, and imports 6th after Saudi Arabia. Last year, Korea's trade volume with Taiwan was $47.771 billion, beating Australia's $42.668 billion. 10 years ago, in 2011, Korea and Taiwan traded $32.9 billion, ranking 7th after Hong Kong. Taiwan is Korea's 6th largest trading partner, but the export industry is paying keen attention as China's military training may disrupt imports and exports. China announced that it would conduct military exercises around Taiwan from 1 p.m. on the same day to 1 p.m. on the 7th. Therefore, Asiana Airlines has already been disrupted in some areas, such as changing the flight schedule of direct flights to Taiwan on the same day. For the export industry, which suffered massive logistical disruptions due to the Russia-Ukraine war, the heightened tension surrounding Taiwan is bound to be worrisome. A man in his 50s, who stabbed a couple in the street in broad daylight and seriously injured them, fled for about 100 kilometers and even caused a commotion, but was caught by the police. Jeongup Police Station in Jeollabuk-do announced on the 3rd that it arrested A in his 50s on charges of attempted murder. A is accused of stabbing B and his spouse and running away in front of a bank located in Jeongup at 11:50 a.m. that day. It is known that A stabbed B in the neck several times, stabbed his wife, and fled in his carnival van. The police, who were dispatched after receiving a report, arrested a near Sita Ejeon IC on Honam Expressway, about 100 kilometers from the scene of the incident, after an hour and 40 minutes of chase. During the confrontation with the police, A caused a self-inflicted disturbance, such as stabbing himself in the neck, which caused the surrounding roads to be congested for about 30 minutes. Victim B and his spouse were seriously injured and taken to the hospital, and are said to be in critical condition. It is known that A was also taken to a hospital for treatment. The police believe that A is acquainted with B's couple, and will investigate the exact motive for the crime. Recently, a man in his 50s secretly took a mobile crackdown camera installed by the police and hid it elsewhere on an outer road in Uljugun, Ulsan, drawing attention. The incident occurred on July 27 at Gunggyunjeong intersection in Sangbuk-myeon, Uljugun, Ulsan. The police installed a mobile speed camera here at 9:20 a.m. on the same day, went to retrieve the equipment at 4:30 p.m., and confirmed that the camera disappeared. It was an expensive equipment worth 17 million won introduced in January 2020. The Traffic Department and the Criminal Department of the Uljua Police Station immediately conducted the investigation through CCTV analysis and investigation, but it was not easy to find clues. Then, on the afternoon of July 31, 4 days after the incident, a man in his 50s turned himself into the police, claiming that he was responsible. The man's job was known as a fire official, and it was reported that he did not steal the camera, but just moved it near the place where it was originally installed. The police are looking into the reason why the man committed such a crime in anger when he was caught speeding. Meanwhile, mobile unmanned control cameras are expensive equipment of about 20 million won per unit, so the number of equipment operated in Ulsan is not large. A total of 10 units are operated at 5 police stations, 2 each. Police are cracking down on 155 speeding areas in Ulsan. A large sinkhole occurred near the construction site near Naksan Beach in Yanjiang-gun, Gangwon-do on the 3rd, causing the nearby convenience store building to collapse. BGF Retail, the convenience store's affiliated headquarters, said, "We will apply compensation so that there is no damage to the store." The sinkhole occurred at 6:43 a.m. near the construction site of a new living accommodation facility near Naksan Beach. The sinkhole is 12 meters wide, 8 meters long, and 5 meters deep, which caused more than half of the building with convenience store CU in front of it to collapse. Fortunately, there were no casualties as 96 people, including convenience store employees and guests at nearby accommodations, hurriedly evacuated after discovering signs of collapse. BGF Retail said, the damaged stores will be compensated for damage with comprehensive property insurance with the headquarters, adding, "We understand that sinkholes have occurred due to the construction that was currently underway nearby. The exact cause of the accident will also be determined," he explained. First of all, after handling insurance, the cause of the accident and the responsibility for the occurrence of the sinkhole are expected to be identified, and then the claim for the right to indemnity is expected to proceed. An earlier official said, the sinkhole was quite large and deep, but it is fortunate that there was no casualties, adding, "We will properly apply compensation so that there is no damage to the franchise store." The so-called entertainment detective, which informs whether a boyfriend or husband enters a prostitution business, has been revived. Recently, entertainment detectives have been rampant, saying that if requested through SNS such as Telegram and Kakao Talk open chat rooms, they will check access records from databases used by prostitution business owners. Along with reviews of using entertainment detectives, inquiries are being posted online to recommend such companies. In some cases, a company that has stopped working since 2018 resumed promoting SNS in April this year. According to Naver Trend, which analyzes search trends, last month's search volume for entertainment detectives increased 3 to 5 times than usual. The entertainment detective first appeared on the internet site of the same name in 2018, making headlines around the girls' elementary school community, but it seems to be drawing attention again recently. However, concerns are raised that it is not only illegal to trade other people's personal information, but also that the credibility of these information may be reduced, resulting in innocent victims. In fact, there are many cases in which those who operated under the banner of entertainment detectives at the time of their first popularity in 2018 were handed over to trial on charges of violating the Information and Communication Network Act and were convicted. A was sentenced to 10 months in prison, suspended for 2 years, and ordered to collect 23 million won for providing 489 clients with access to prostitution businesses from August to October 2018. B and C were handed over to trial for handing over 9,911 access records to prostitution businesses for a year from September 2018 and were sentenced to 3.5 years in prison and 1 year, respectively, as they merged with other cases such as fraud and blackmail. This is a sign of the occurrence of victims in relation to recent companies. D recently filed a complaint with Yungnang Police Station in Seoul, claiming that an entertainment detective provided his girlfriend with false entertainment business usage details and eventually broke up. However, since the defamation charge under the Information and Communication Network Act, which indicated in the complaint, was decided not to be sent last month, D has filed an objection to investigate on charges of violating the Personal Information Protection Act and fraud. Former South Chungcheong Province Governor Ahn Hee-young, who has been imprisoned after being sentenced by the Supreme Court for sexually assaulting a performing secretary, was released from prison on the 4th. According to the legal community, Ahn was released from prison earlier in the day after completing his 3.5-year sentence at Yeoju Prison in Gyeonggi Province. Former Governor Ahn greeted about 10 people, including friends from his hometown, as he left the main gate. About 60 acquaintances, including Kang Jun-hyun and Kim Jong-min of the Democratic Party of Korea, who are known as friends of former governor on school days, visited the prison. Ahn bowed to reporters and did not answer questions from reporters asking how he felt about his release and future plans. Afterwards, he left in a car waiting in front of the main gate. Former Governor Ahn was put on trial in April 2018 on charges of adultery and forced molestation of supervisors and molestation by professional power under the Sexual Violence Crime Punishment Act. From July 2017 to February 2018, he was accused of sexually assaulting his secretary 4 times, making 5 surprise molestation, and using his professional power to molest him once. In response, the first trial acquitted Ahn, but the second trial found him guilty of 9 out of 10 charges, sentenced him to 3 years and 6 months in prison and arrested him in court. Later, in September 2019, the Supreme Court finalized this ruling. Former Governor Ahn was temporarily released after receiving a Mother's Award in July 2020 while in prison and a Father's Award in March this year. In September last year, he divorced his ex-wife in prison. Former Governor Ahn is not allowed to run in elections for 10 years after being released from prison under the Public Official Election Act and the Act on the Effectiveness of Sentences. Former Governor Ahn is known to move to Yangpyeong, Gyeonggi-do, immediately after being released from prison, and continue his hiding for the time being. A red light has been turned on for Hyundai Motor's production of Ioniq 5, a dedicated electric vehicle. According to the automobile industry on the 4th, Infineon, a German semiconductor company that supplies power module chips to Hyundai Motor, confirmed defects in its power module chips produced from April to early June. IGBT, one of the power semiconductor devices, is considered a key component of electric vehicle production. Although this chip was scheduled to be supplied to Hyundai Motor in mid-August, Infineon reportedly discarded all of the chips. As it becomes impossible to procure key semiconductors to enter Ioniq 5, Hyundai Motor is considering ways to prevent production disruptions. Hyundai Motor said, "We are in talks with Infineon because there is a possibility that some of the semiconductors may be short of supply," adding, "We will do our best to ensure that production is not disrupted as we are currently looking for countermeasures." Automobile manufacturers have entered a diet that reduces the weight of electric vehicles. Only when the vehicle is light can fuel efficiency be high and driving distance be increased on a single charge. According to the Korea Automobile Research Institute, reducing the weight of electric cars by about 10% will improve fuel efficiency by 4 to 6%. Automobile manufacturers are working with battery manufacturers to reduce their weight from the development stage. However, with current technology, there is a limit to reducing the weight of the battery. For this reason, it is focusing on lightening other parts by utilizing new materials. Tesla does not use panel bonding when making Model Y's rear chassis. Instead, a gigapress method is applied in which an aluminum solution is poured into a mold and manufactured at once. Aluminum is lighter than steel. Through this, it is known that it has decreased by about 30% compared to the existing weight. The Washington Post and other foreign media reported that U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who is on a tour of Asia, had dinner with TSMC Chairman Mark Ryo before leaving Taiwan on the 3rd. Pelosi left Taipei's Songshan Airport at 6:02 p.m. Pelosi arrived at U.S. Air Force Base in Ozan at 9:26 p.m. The dinner with TSMC chairman was Pelosi's last visit to Taiwan. Pelosi is expected to have explained semiconductor chips and science laws and discussed cooperation measures during the meeting with TSMC chairman Mark Ryo. The Semiconductor Chip and Science Act passed both the U.S. Senate and the U.S. Senate, leaving only President Joe Biden's signature process. The key point of the law is to provide $52 billion, about 68.5 trillion won, in subsidies to companies that build semiconductor factories in the U.S. Many semiconductor companies, including Intel, are busy getting federal funding guaranteed by law. However, under the Semiconductor Chip and Support Act, companies that received federal subsidies are prohibited from expanding investment in the Chinese market. More precisely, China will not be able to expand its semiconductor chip production facilities that are more advanced than 28 nanometers over the next 10 years. Restriction regulations apply to both logic chips and memory. Violation of the restriction rule is a breach of the contract and requires full return of the federal aid. For TSMC, this provision may be an obstacle to making bold U.S. investments. In fact, Bloomberg said, there is an observation that TSMC and the Semiconductor Chip and Science Act have lowered the priority of receiving federal subsidies, adding, there is a possibility that the construction of the Arizona plant may be delayed. TSMC is expected to produce Apple A-series and M-series chips at its Arizona plant. Therefore, it is predicted that Pelosi may have tried to get a guarantee to apply for federal funding for the Semiconductor Chip and Science Act in a meeting with Chairman Mark Ryo. Bloomberg also reported that TSMC intends to find out in more detail how much funds are needed to implement its goal of operating the Arizona plant from 2024. Major U.S. media pointed out that House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan could amplify the U.S.-China conflict and put Taiwan in long-term pain. I wonder if Pelosi's visit to Taiwan was worth enduring the consequences of future U.S.-China relations, CNN said in an article analyzing Pelosi's move to Taiwan on the 3rd. We should examine whether she only provoked China without strategic interests. If the visit worsens the worsening U.S.-China relationship to an irreversible level, his judgment will be a big mistake, CNN said. If China takes measures to threaten Taiwan's safety with this opportunity, it will be a calculation mistake. In a column titled Taiwan's Real Crisis Begins After Pelosi Returns Home, Josh Rogan, a columnist in the Washington Post, said, after Pelosi's visit to Taiwan, the storm will hit weeks, months, and years after he returns home. Logan analyzed that China will expand China's military advantage in the Taiwan Strait under the pretext of Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. China has a very wide range of means to harm Taiwan, he said, citing a U.S. administration official. In the past years, China has used it as an excuse for counterattack if it catches enemy mistakes, and this incident is also likely to be used as such. For the success of foreign policy, we need two things: principles and proper timing for implementation. The U.S. principles may have been shown during his visit to Taiwan, but the rest of it was problematic, he said. With Pelosi's visit, President Biden is burdened with resolving the long-term threat China poses to Taiwan. In this regard, I don't think the visit to Taiwan is wise, he criticized. The distribution industry was stirred by the national proposal, which suddenly appeared in the president's office late last month. This is because the plan to abolish mandatory holidays, which was a desire of the large mart industry, was nominated. The government promised to reflect the top 3 proposals in state affairs through a referendum, instilling expectations in the industry as the abolition of mandatory shutdowns has remained at the top. In an 8-day referendum, the abolition of mandatory shutdowns at large discount stores topped the list with about 570,000 likes. However, the government invalidated the reflection of state affairs on the grounds that interviews such as overlapping voting occurred. Some were flattered by this decision, and some breathed a sigh of relief. Even though it is a sensitive issue, the incompetence of the president's office, which was included in the top 10 without sufficient discussion, only raised social conflicts without any change. Conflicts between stakeholders triggered by the government's hasty move are not expected to settle easily. Some large-scale mart unions insisted on guaranteeing workers' right to take a leave of absence before abolishing the mandatory shutdown, while merchants in traditional markets warned of collective action against the abolition of the mart shutdown next week. The large supermarket industry is cautious as conflicts are sharp, even though it wants to abolish the mandatory holiday. What was at least confirmed in the top 10 public proposals that created only controversy was that consumers perceived that the target threatening the traditional market was no longer large marts. The Distribution Industry Development Act, which was created more than 10 years ago, contained social agreements considering the distribution market situation at the time. The decision to set mandatory holidays for large discount stores was a device to protect traditional markets to a minimum. However, all retailers, including traditional markets and large discount stores, are losing ground online such as Commuting. A threat to the traditional market is an online mall, not a large mart that is in a slump. It is right that the distribution law, which has become nominal even as a minimum protective barrier to protect traditional markets, should be changed according to new social agreements. In fact, the reason why large discount stores are desperate for the revision of the distribution law is not just to increase weekend sales. This is to cope with the present and the upcoming future when the distribution industry has shifted from offline to online. Large local marts that do not have a dedicated logistics center can only be delivered online on business days. In other words, online delivery will also stop on days when mandatory holidays are in place. This mobile user experience causes dissatisfaction. Eventually, consumers delete large-scale mart apps and head to online malls such as Commuting. As the online shopping market grows, large discount stores will inevitably face a bigger crisis in the tilted playground. It is not just a matter of maintaining or abolishing mandatory holidays at large discount stores. It is time for the government to move more closely so that it can find an agreement in sharp interests. Lee Jae-myung, a lawmaker of the Democratic Party of Korea, reported that he paid 15 million won in the name of a driver to a deceased witness in connection with his wife Kim Hye-kyung's alleged misappropriation of corporate cards. JTBC reported on the 3rd that according to the details of political funds spent by Rep. Lee Jae-myung to the NEC, he paid more than 15 million won to his spouse's vehicle driver. According to reports, after checking political spending for 3 months from July to October during last year's presidential election, Rep. Lee Jae-myung reported that he gave more than 15 million won in total to the spouse driver for his monthly salary and activities, which was identified as JTBC also confirmed that this person was the same person as the deceased reference, A, who was found dead at a house in Yeongtong-gu, Suwon Si, Gyeonggi-do, on the 26th of last month, is a former Songnam official at the Defense Security Command in charge of special information of the former army, who served as an intelligence agent in Songnam from 2009 to 2018. At the time when Lee Jae-myung was serving as Songnam mayor, A reportedly had a relationship with B, who served as Kim's performance secretary at the time. If A, who died as lawmaker Lee Jae-myung claimed, was not Kim Hye-kyung's driver, the payment details were falsely written. In this case, it is a violation of the Political Funds Act. Kim, in his 40s, who made an extreme choice after being questioned by the police in connection with Kim Hye-kyung, wife of Lee Jae-myung of the Democratic Party of Korea, was found to have driven a vehicle of Lee's election camp and received about 15 million won. Kim, who died, reportedly received about 15 million won from the end of July to the end of October last year in the name of spouse vehicle driver activity expenses. In a related development, some politicians are also claiming that Kim, who died, drove Kim Hye-kyung's vehicle. In response, lawmaker Lee Jae-myung said, "The person who drove Kim Hye-kyung's vehicle during the presidential election is a different person from Kim who died as a volunteer who Kim Hye-kyung knows well. Kim drove the vehicle of Lee Jae-myung's wife, Kim Hye-kyung, and legally signed a contract under the Political Funds Act and received allowances for driving vehicles for simple labor," he said. Kim, who died, was an acquaintance of B, a former Gyeonggi Province 5th grade civil servant who was involved in the alleged misappropriation of corporate cards, and made an extreme choice on the 26th of last month after being investigated by the police as a witness in connection with the case. The police reportedly found out the circumstances in which B, who acted as Kim Hae-kyung's secretary, paid with Kim's credit card, cancelled it, and paid again with a corporate card in Gyeonggi Province. Meanwhile, the Gyeonggi Southern Police Agency's Anti-Corruption and Economic Crime Investigation Team called in B as a suspect in the alleged misappropriation of corporate cards earlier in the day. B is also suspected of illegally receiving the necessary prescription from Kim Hae-kyung at the Gyeonggi Provincial Government's medical office. The police reportedly questioned B whether there was an order from his superiors, including Kim Hae-kyung. As the police said they could complete the investigation into the alleged misappropriation of corporate credit cards in the middle of this month, some predict that the investigation of Kim Hae-kyung is imminent. The police reportedly summoned B, a key figure in the alleged misappropriation of corporate cards by Kim Hae-kyung, the spouse of Lee Jae-myung, a lawmaker of the Democratic Party of Korea. The Gyeonggi Nambu Police Agency's Anti-Corruption and Economic Crime Investigation Team reportedly called in B, who worked as a fifth-class employee of the Gyeonggi Provincial Government's General Affairs Division when Lee served as governor of Gyeonggi-do Province, as a suspect. B is suspected of acting as Kim's assistant and is at the center of various suspicions, including the private misappropriation of corporate cards in Gyeonggi Province and the issuance of illegal prescriptions. The police reportedly questioned B about various facts, including whether there was an order or intervention from his superiors, including Kim, in the process of misappropriating corporate cards. B returned home after hours of investigation. Although B has been investigated as a suspect in a case of violating the Public Official Election Act in connection with the allegation, it is reported that this is the first time he has been summoned as a suspect in the case investigation. On the 3rd, the Gyeonggi Southern Police Agency's Anti-Corruption Economic Crime Investigation Team is investigating B, a former Gyeonggi provincial government official who was in charge of the protocol of former presidential candidate Kim Hae-kyung, as a suspect. B worked as a public official at the Gyeonggi provincial government and was in charge of Kim Hae-kyung's protocol, and in the process, he was a key person who used the corporate card to purchase food with the Gyeonggi provincial government's corporate card and send it to Kim Hae-kyung's house. It is also suspected of mobilizing subordinates to Kim Hae-kyung's private errands in the process. When the problem arose, B issued a statement in February and said, "I asked the secretary to do something that no one had asked me to do," adding, "All the responsibility lies with me." In response, civic groups and others filed a complaint with the police against B on charges of false disclosure of facts under the Public Official Election Act, saying he falsely explained for the purpose of the election of Lee Jae-myung, who was a presidential candidate. The police said they would complete the investigation into the alleged misappropriation of corporate cards by Rep. Lee Jae-myung's wife Kim Hae-kyung in mid-August. However, controversy arose on the 26th of last month when A, who was once investigated as a reference in connection with the corporate card allegation, was found dead. At that time, the police reportedly found circumstantial evidence that A's personal card was directly used in the process of switching in which he paid with a personal card and then paid again with a corporate card. Due to the corporate card limitation regulations, B paid first by rotating several personal credit cards and later paid again with a corporate card, and A's personal card was also used in the process. It was revealed that the prosecution, which is monitoring the leak of investigative secrets to Songbangwol Group, conducted its third raid on Songgwol headquarters. The prosecution is known to look into whether Songbangwol was involved in leaking investigative secrets. On the 2nd, the Suwon District Prosecutor's Office sent an investigation team to the headquarters of Songbangwol Group in Seoul to conduct a digital forensics search of the PCs of executives and employees of the department in charge of the government office in the group. The prosecution conducted a search and seizure of Songbangwol Group's headquarters in late June and early July, and launched a search and seizure again in about a month. The prosecution saw Investigator A of the Suwon District Prosecutor's Office's Criminal Division 6, who is investigating the alleged embezzlement and breach of trust of Songbangwol Group, as a leaker, and recently conducted a search and seizure of Investigator A's office. Investigator A denies the related charges, but was recently appointed to a non-investigation department. At the end of last month, the prosecution also conducted a raid on the law firm M, which includes lawyer Lee Tae-hyung, who was a lawyer for Lee Jae-myung of the Democratic Party of Korea. The Public Investigation Department of the Suwon District Prosecutor's Office found confidential data while searching the place on the 7th of last month in connection with Lee Jae-myung's alleged payment of lawyer fees. At the time, the prosecution reportedly confirmed that investigative secrets demanding extreme security, including data on warrants generated by the Suwon District Prosecutor's Office's Criminal Division 6, which is investigating the embezzlement and breach of trust of Song Bang-gul Group. The prosecution suspects that lawyer B, who worked at a law firm such as lawyer Lee Tae-hyung, was involved in the leak of investigative secrets. In this additional seizure and search, the prosecution reportedly seized and searched lawyer B's PC. Lawyer B, a former special prosecutor, served as an outside director of Song Bang-gul Group until February this year, and has recently been appointed as a lawyer for the embezzlement and breach of trust cases of Song Bang-gul Group. Law firm M, which includes lawyer Lee Tae-hyung and lawyer B, is known to have had a close relationship with Song Bang-gul Group. Song Bang-gul Group is under suspicion of paying lawyer fees worth 2 billion won to lawyer Lee Tae-hyung in the name of commission fees for lawmaker Lee Jae-myung's violation of the Public Official Election Act. Prosecutors believe that officials of Song Bang-gul Group are likely to have been involved in the leak, given that former chairman Kim, the group's real owner, left the country shortly after the leak of investigative secrets took place in late May this year. As soon as the analysis of the seized data is completed, the prosecution plans to conduct an investigation into key officials of the Song Bang-gul Group. Thank you for watching today.